let's present our two magnificent colleagues today. It's a privilege once again to introduce Louisa LaGrotto. Louisa LaGrotto is a retired teacher. It's a 2006 Indiana Teacher of the Year, the Department of Education, and also a 2017 IFLTA Teacher of the Year, our representative in Central States. Many years of experience, over 30 years in the world language field. And we have a special guest, magnificent teacher, colleague, president, also former president of IFLTA, Tom Alsop. He won the 2019 Founders Award that is given by Central States, and he has also received plenty of awards with ATSP and IFLTA. So we have a different format today where we are going to hear Louisa sharing her experience and providing information that you could take for your following years. And the person asking these questions about her experience would be Tom Alsop, who also has a radio show and blog about world language teachers in Indiana. So I really thank you, Louisa, for accepting this invitation. I need to say that everything it's so great with you. Anytime that I invite you to a workshop, a session, you are there, and I really appreciate that. You know, uh, willing to support our field. And also Tom Alsop, thank you for joining us and being the person who is going to ask those questions.
Very good. Israel, thank you so much. Charmaine, thank you so much. And Tomas, I truly thank you for saying yes to this invitation. And as I start our presentation, I just really wanted to tell our audience that I needed a comrade, somebody who knows me well, someone who has been there since the very beginning of my teaching career. And there was no other person that I know who does this well as far as the interview process and engaging people into the profession like Tom Alsop. So Tom, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and start with our first slide, which really comes from our ACFL standards. And it's important. Today's is a discussion on community building and leadership. And the communities on the 5 C's of ACFL often don't get the attention they deserve. So I wanted to bring this attention to our audience so they can see the goal area and the importance of communities and how we build that capacity and competency within our students, but also with ourselves as teachers. And Tom, I know you have a strength in the area of culture and communication, and I obviously have a passion for that as well. But when we were talking, we had our thoughts about where does communities place? So I think you'll agree with me that we have a good place to start with communities.
I totally agree with you, Louisa. And we're talking about two important points here. One of them is obviously the communication part, but the communities especially important. And as you mentioned, it's very often neglected when we talk about the 5 C's. And perhaps we don't do near enough about communities. And I think the audience is going to enjoy your presentation today and the way you tackled the communities and the way you divided them up. And I'm not going to say any more about that yet. But I would like to tell the audience that I would put in a plug for all the great language organizations out there, IFLTA, Central States, ATSP, ACFL, and all those great language organizations, the ones on the East Coast and the West Coast, et cetera. And I would encourage all of you to participate in those. I was very fortunate over the years to be able to do that. And I know Louisa is going to tell you here how she did it. And I hope you pay attention and watch all that she did so that when you, especially the young teachers, that you can get involved in all these wonderful professional organizations.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. So let's go forward. in communities, one of the things I also wanted to bring to all of our attention, this is just not about our learners, it's about ourselves as the educator. So whether we look at this from the school and global community itself and how we use language, it's also about being a lifelong learner. And not every teacher comes into the profession maybe thinking that way. And in my personal experience, this has been my vocation. I have totally taken the whole role of being a teacher in my professional public life as well as my private life. And that's why communities for me has been so important, because I couldn't have done any of this without the sense of community and in my formation. And as Tom has just mentioned too, this whole idea of whether we're developing ourselves as the professional or we're in the classroom working with our students, if the students don't have that sense of community, I can't even imagine how you're going to run a classroom. And I know Tom can say plenty about that, because his classroom experience that he shared with me as I was starting out was like no other I'd ever seen in my life before. Tom?
Well, I think the idea that you have, Louisa, that I think that the listeners and the watchers here today are going to appreciate is how that you do the communities with the school, then with the professional organizations, that community, the school community, and the global community in your travels. And you really touched all of those beautifully. And I think it's going to be a delight for everybody to see here in a minute what you did. So thank you, Louisa, for all you did, by the way. So
my pleasure. Let's go, and we're going to start not too far back, but just back enough, because it's important. And I always say this message to my students, but I'm going to say this to all the teachers out here watching today, that I'm a gringa. And so as a person who took on Spanish in 8th grade until I graduated from high school, it became my passion. And because of this wonderful teacher that I'm looking at right here on the screen, there was a gentleman, his name was Antonio Otero, or Senor Otero. And yes, he was fabulous. And I had him my junior and senior in high school. He did the AP program and developed us all to take the exams and appreciate so much what the Spanish and Latino American literature had to offer as high school students. So I brought this as the first community. That is one of formation and how we develop our language. And for me, this was a new language. This is my second language, but I knew in order to become proficient and get better and better, I had to align myself with people that already spoke the language. So of course, this was a native speaker. Senor Otero was from Puerto Rico, and definitely gave me all of that passion.
did we lose the audio? They're back.
Seems that
There we go.
we have lost Louisa.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Louisa.
Louisa.
So we have lost. Oh no, Louisa is there.
Here we go.
Mm.
So just give me a second. It happens.
It's normal.
You can unmute yourself, Louisa, now.
Thank you. Oh, how about now?
There you go.
Okay. All right. Back to the show. All right. Let me just make sure you guys can see it.
There we go.
All right. Let me get the presentation status.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Shall we continue on, Tom?
Well, I had a question for you.
Oh, go right ahead.
For the audience. Louisa, this Senor Antonio Otero must have been one of the most incredible teachers of all time, because for 10 or 20 years, every time Louisa and Tony, her husband, we get together once in a while, and they're both Spanish teachers, as my wife is as well. And we'd get together and we'd always hear about Antonio Otero. And I'd say, boy, he must have been an incredible teacher. And he was. And every time, but basic audience, listen to this. You guys out there are going to be like Antonio Otero, right? I mean,
Exactly.
there'll be someday there'll be teachers that your students who are teachers are today doing this, and they're talking about you and how great you were. So it's astounding. But I do have a question about Antonio Otero. What did he do? He must have done some incredible activities in class. What did he do?
Well, what made, besides being a very attractive man, as I thought at that age, he had a charisma about getting us to speak. He always shared his personal experience of what it was like being in Puerto Rico. And when he came to the Cleveland area, he was very honest, and he also loved the literature that he was teaching us and the grammar points. So it was just about his persona, how he gave himself truly and freely to all the students, and got us very involved in speaking. And during the 70s, he was probably the first teacher I had who made us talk and respond in Spanish. And that, for me, it was scary, but at the same time, I loved the challenge of it. And he was so patient. And we did have a few students that were native speakers, but that wasn't very common back in the late 70s. I graduated in 79. So I would have to say just the way he got us to engage with him through his speaking. And also he gave us assignments, and he expected us to talk about those tasks the very next day. And everything was about communication, because he was preparing us for the AP exams. And so we had to be absolutely at the best of our game. And so I would say it was that, getting us to talk and never stopping and never giving up on us. Thank you. Well, moving on, the language community continues when I get to IU. Also, Senor Otero was very instrumental in helping me choose this as the university that had one of the most amazing programs in world languages. And obviously, I spent a lot of time in Ballantyne Hall. But the particular community I want to mention here is La Casa Española, which was a residence center with individual housing. And in these particular housing units, there were 4 languages represented, but I got to use the Spanish outside of class. And so I wanted to just highlight that even in my freshman year, I had the opportunity to be with my housemates, and we would travel and do different things for the community. You see a picture of us singing a post-Christmas carol presentation in Columbus, Indiana, in a very small mall at the time. And of course, on the left is my future husband, that's Tony. So we were buddies from the very beginning. And so I just wanted to show people that even the things you do your freshman year in college have great impact on us for the rest of our lives. But that ability to talk to people, we had a number of Spanish speakers that were native living in the house, and it was just instrumental for me to be able to continue. Tom?
Well, for the audience, a quick plug for Indiana University in Israel. Israel's a professor at IU, and we are very proud of Indiana University over the years and the great Spanish department that exists in Bloomington, Indiana. And we are especially it's interesting because Tony and Louisa met and spent a lot of time together in Ballantyne Hall. That's also where I met my wife, Jill, in graduate school studying Spanish literature. And that's also where my son met his wife. And they're both college professors in Spanish. And they met at Ballantyne Hall. So this Ballantyne Hall in Indiana University and language in Spanish. It was
lots of great memories, for sure.
But I did have a quick
I'm going to move on. I might check Tom's audio. Tom, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
Hello. Okay.
Luisa, are you there? So it seems we have a technical problem in this moment. So let's wait for Luisa to join the session. So don't forget that on August 6th, we are going to have Dr. Stephen Krashen in our series, August 6th, and also more presenters during August. We are going to have Grant Volunteer from Minnesota as well. We are going to have more ACFL Teachers of the Year and Central States Teacher of the Year. And yeah, we are so honored to have Louisa, not in this moment, we're waiting for Louisa, but in this special presentation of community engagement and leadership, now that she has retired and sharing all the experience with the community. Luisa LaGrotto retired from North Central, and we have the opportunity to listen to her. Chame, do you have any information from Luisa?
No,
So Tom, could you
let me
please,
call.
now that you know Luisa very much about the leadership that Luisa has, we have that the merits of being Indiana Teacher of the Year and IFLTA Teacher of the Year um, comes with the this engagement that she has with the community.
Well, she has a great rapport with everybody, pretty much. She's very dynamic, and we've obviously been totally blessed by having her in the profession, and it's her life, and she's given her life to kids, and she goes out and she gets down in I like to say, the trenches sometimes, and does a lot of things. She got no credit for them and did them no matter what, and she always helps, and she's always there to help, and she's just a wonderful teacher in person. And I was fortunate enough a couple years ago to get her here to teach. Almost I was there all day, and I was totally amazed by the energy she had. This is a middle school, and the energy that she had with those kids, and all the great things that she did with them in a short period of time, and how the great respect the students had for her. And just, she's a rare teacher, and just magnificent. So, and as far as the community goes, she was always giving. She helped us a lot in 1987 AM games, and she helped us with the Cuba delegation, and did a huge amount of work, just incredible amount of work, and always there to help. And always, as you said, she always accepts things that sometimes she doesn't get enough credit for. And so, yeah, it's just a magnificent teacher, and worked her whole life for perfection. And she's just, everything is just totally perfect. And she just is a perfectionist and does a great job with everything she does.
Okay. So Luisa, it's here again.
Israel, if I may, I'll just also add that as Louisa's methods teacher a few years ago, and I can't even count how many years ago, as actually her former methods teacher, I had invited her back to Indiana University and my cat has some say in this, sorry. I had invited her to come to my class to talk, and I think everybody in class was so blown away by the fact that she walked in and she said, her very first question to everybody was, what is your message? What message do you as a teacher have for your class? And everyone stood there and totally dumbfounded. No one truly could step up and say, this is what I represent, these are my values, or this is my philosophy, etc. And she just really brought that more into focus with everyone. And it was very valuable. I remember she had just been elected Teacher of the Year or somewhere in that time realm. I think she's ready again, so I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Right, that's great to hear that. And like that, as I was mentioning, she is always willing to help, to offer workshops, to go to different districts, schools, and to offer the expertise. So the commitment that Lisa has for the profession and also the community. She will mention what she has done with the community in her place. and also other projects that she was able to have during all these years. So, Lisa?
Can you guys hear me? I don't know if I was talking on the phone or mute myself, so you just have to let me know. Should I
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, there is an echo because I also have the mic on the lap. So should I turn, which one should I turn off?
Turn off, try to turn off your phone.
The phone? Okay. Yeah. How does that sound?
Sounds so far good.
Okay, okay. I think the thing I'm going to have to do, if you putting this in presentation mode, for some reason was challenging with the audio. So I don't know if John May, I think you are in charge of my screen right now. Is that true? Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can move the slides, we can just keep it in this method, if that's okay.
Yeah. This one or this one?
We're going forward. So go down.
This one?
Yeah. That's great. Okay. All right, Tom, are we back?
Yes. Sorry for the interruption. So, Charmy, please, the presentation mode with the closed captions.
Oh, let me see. I cannot see the. Oh, let me see.
Next to share, present. Okay, and then the closed captions at the bottom. So we are all teachers and we understand this situation happens. So thank you for your patience. So, Louisa.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Tom and I, we're ready for anything. And this is probably some of the stuff we experienced this past spring while we're all teaching remotely with our classes. So I'm not bothered by it at all. I just want to make this be as clear and visibly satisfying for the rest who are watching us. What we have before us is continuing my formation with New Language Community. Probably the most important part of my IU experience was going to Spain and spending my junior year abroad in Madrid. And for me, just having that opportunity to be living in total immersion with the university setting, with living with the senora and her family, you couldn't have a better experience in your formation. And Tom, I know you'll support me in this, that if teachers don't travel and don't get abroad and don't speak, they're not going to be better. Would you agree?
Totally agree. And I had a quick question there.
Yes.
What aspect about being in Madrid helped you the most to be a better teacher and a leader in the profession?
Very good. Well, I'm going to tell you, the one aspect was every single time I went on the street to defend myself in the language, whether I was going to a restaurant, a cafe, to the bank, to a clinic when I was with a friend helping that person out. Anytime I put myself out there where I could not rely on the English, but totally on my Spanish, I learned the most about my courage, my tenacity and ability to keep going, even when I didn't have all the vocabulary words I needed to survive the moment. But that to me showed me that you can handle a lot under stress and it makes you better. And if you don't feel that stress, you sometimes can't get any better. And those are the moments I grew the most. Absolutely. Go ahead, Chame. Okay. In this final year, Tom and I were talking and reflecting, just because I was a major in Spanish literature with a minor in telecommunications. My final year, when I came back from Madrid, was quite a phenomenal year because I had opportunities to expand looking at languages. I had spent quite a bit of time in Catalonia, so I was interested in taking a formal class in Catalan with Pep Sobre. I also had friends that were from Tehran, and so I was interested in Farsi and heard that language from time to time, and also was very fascinated with just the whole art of translation. And again, Pep Sobre was my professor who kept us really considering how language works between two different cultures, or multiple cultures, and I just thought that was super important for me to be able to really get the grasp in the subtleties of Spanish. But one of the neatest courses I took as an undergrad was a graduate class for drama, and the focus was Antonio Bueno Vallejo's short play called The Tragaluz, and we presented this at Monroe County Library over a couple of weekends in the spring semester before I graduated, and that was an awesome time. And Tom, I know you have a question for me on this one, and I'm going to let you go ahead and ask it.
Well, first of all, I would like to congratulate you on all these honors. honors here. If everybody takes a look at that, at Indiana University to graduate with honors in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and also Masters of Arts in Spanish and Education, graduated magna cum laude. So that in itself speaks tons of sentences about what you do and what you believe in, and I know you work so hard. Now, Buero Vallejo, of course, if I recall correctly, in Spanish literature, wrote about the blind people, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Quite a bit.
That was a different play.
That was En la hora de oscuridad. This was
Exactly.
a different one. But my question for you is, to the teachers out there and to their students, what benefit does working hard in Spanish class, how does that help you be a better teacher?
Well, it gave me a lot of courage because the harder you work, the more you incorporate language into the way you are as a person. And even sometimes you'll do things that are very bold and you don't even realize you have that much boldness. I'm just going to say, after we finished this Traga Luz presentation, several of the cast players in the class with me, we called the man. We looked him up in the directory before there was internet and found his secretary. And we woke him up on a Sunday morning and we had to tell him that we had just done like 3 or 4 presentations of Traga Luz. And that man spoke to every single one of us. And to speak to somebody that you've never met and share your enthusiasm for what they wrote and what you wanted to present to the community in Bloomington was just an honor. And I think what I always want to tell my students is you can always go further and always do more. It's just what you're willing to try. And we had the formation. We were so confident, probably overconfident in what we had to say, but quite a few of the people on this presentation were not native speakers, but we learned so much about the presentation of the language and making the sounds the best they could be, and doing, enacting someone else's culture on this stage in Bloomington was pretty tremendous. So I'll say that. Chame, next slide. Well, talking about some boldness here, our community becomes another opportunity. And Indianapolis was preparing probably since 1985, 86 for the coming of the Pan American Games that were in the summer of 87. And so at that time, Tony, who was my fiance at that point, he and I were doing a radio show, and that particular summer, Tony got involved with Tom with the Cuban delegation that came to represent the Cuban athletes and the games. And so what we see are just 2 amazing pictures of me interviewing another gal who worked at the Hispano American Center, who helped us sponsor the Impacto Latino radio show. And also that same summer, Tony and I are with 2 delegates, and Tom, you're gonna have to help me out with those guys and who they are. But that was an amazing experience, more for my husband than for me, but I did help out anytime you had to host the Cuban delegates.
Yeah, for the people who weren't here in Indianapolis, that was probably the big event that opened Indianapolis to be more of an international city. And it was quite an event. It was a magnificent event. And we were fortunate to work with the Cubanos, and sometimes unfortunate what had happened. I want to say a quick word about Elba Gonzalez. She was kind of a legend in Indianapolis, Elba.
Yes.
And Louisa, could you give a quick sentence or 2 about her?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Elba is living on the south side today. She belongs to the same parish at St. Roch's with me. In addition, at the time I met her, she was our education specialist in helping immigrants coming into Indianapolis to learn English as a new language. But she also had a license in teaching Spanish. And so after the Hispano Center closed down, she immediately got into public school education, and she taught Spanish in numerous high schools, Catholic schools and public high schools in the south side and other areas in the IPS community. Elba is a dear heart, and definitely she was a great role model, kind of like a second mom for me and Tony. She really kept us in line as we were volunteering for the Hispano American Center. Yeah, very good. Jamaine, next slide. Well, now we start teaching, and I have to say, Monroe Gregg Schools is dear to my heart because I spent my first 4 years of teaching. I taught high school Spanish, a little bit of junior high, and also 3 grade levels at Hull Elementary. The second, third, and fourth year I was there. But in this time frame, what became super important, and this is probably where I really want to emphasize for every young teacher, any teacher in the middle of her career, his career, or currently wherever you are, the language organizations that kept me going, because I was in a very small community in Monrovia. There just weren't many world language teachers. We didn't have our own department. So I had to rely on folks like Tom and his colleagues and the people at Ben Davis in the community, and my husband in his school. He was at Prairie Meridian at the time, but we needed an organization to help us network. For those of us who are in very small community settings, the networking is your lifeline to staying connected. And I'm sorry, I think cats are adorable. Sorry. And when we had the opportunities to connect right away, Tom told me, Louisa, you got to join the organization. Tony was already doing that. And of course, if you're joining IFLTA, you got to join your language group. So IFLTA and ATSP were instrumental in getting me going. And boy, they're great at also bringing you in. And as soon as you got something to say, they want you presenting what you feel good about presenting. And so for me, one of the things I knew I needed lots of work on was classroom management, as every new teacher does. But I also was looking for the best and the brightest who had those answers. Now, Tom also had an amazing classroom approach. And so I've always been very happy that he's been willing to let people come and watch him teach. And Tom, you're my role model. You know that. So comments there, Tomas.
Okay. I wanted to ask 2 questions. Can we go back to that last slide?
Yes.
One is, did you have time for a potty break there? I mean, I know you were working a lot.
What are you talking about?
I remember, I don't know how many classes you were teaching, but you were really good.
I was everywhere. Yeah.
You were teaching night and day there, and elementary, middle school, and which
right.
I have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
Real fast. One is, I would like you to say the benefits of having the opportunity to have taught at as many levels as you did. Elementary, middle, high school, college, to be able to comment a minute about that.
Absolutely.
And for teachers to broaden their experience. And then I'd like you to mention that person on the right that you're standing with there. She was credited.
Well, unfortunately, I know who's on the right, but I have the faces of the people hosting the show. Jill Werner was one of my students at Monrovia High School. And so Jill and I go way back. And I particularly remember her because she was in my second year program when I first was starting. And she joined my class, I think the second year I was there. But what's important to note is the fact that I was able to sense where language could go by being involved with the elementary and the middle school. The junior high and the high school were in the same building. So as far as curriculum and extending it so you never repeated the same thing over and over again, I was really, really conscientious about that. And also students who got into the second and third year level were considered those who were really caring about the language. And Jill and her buddies were always cracking me up because they took every challenge I gave them, whether we were looking up all the Christopher Columbuses in the phone book in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and she gets the one that writes back to her. So, who was a lawyer with that name, or we were putting on, because in 1992, we had the 500th anniversary. And so we were doing some pretty interesting polemics with just dramatizing. What does it mean to travel back in 1492? And they acted out some beautiful skits. So for me, the energy and the fact that there's no question, Jill is an awesome instructor. And I know that I had something to do with it, but at the time, I had no idea she was going to choose Spanish as a career. But the content that I was trying to develop was just really replicating everything I was learning and just giving it to the kids at the appropriate level and in the appropriate amount of information. Chami, if you go to the next slide, I want to continue Tom's question. There you go. Because also what's important is the fact that IU is also offering honor programs for teachers who know they need more and more learning. And so Tom started this program. I think, Tom, this was probably the second or third year we were in San Luis Potosí. Second year, yeah. Tony and I joined the group and we were there for 3 weeks. And So we were asked to all create a unit lessons that would reflect the culture of San Luis Potosí. So for me, this was awesome because I needed to develop better curriculum for the elementary kids. So what you see is a picture of some of the students in one of the main, simple parks in downtown San Luis Potosí. But through Tom's connections, we were able to get to know children. Their grandparents were greatly involved in the program, and I was able to interview them, whether playing soccer or just hanging out in the park. And so I created a whole series of dialogues with the different boys and girls I met. And then I brought those into my own classroom. The kids got to see audio and video, and then they created their own dialogues modeling after the ones that the children had done in Spanish. And it's incredible. If you push kids, they'll go as far as you'll take them. And I just was so impressed with the students. Even the fourth graders blew me away. Tom?
You did beautifully interviewing the kids. I remember that. And Louisa had made a VHS at the time.
Yeah.
Did VHS tapes, videotapes, and she made a beautiful tape of these interviews that she did with the kids, shared it with her students. It was magnificent. And I wanted to bring up Dr. Salmon,
Sure.
and he was the co-director of this program with me. He was a wonderful professor from Indiana University. He was a director of Latin American Studies for a long time. And then Luis is going to mention another, we were going to mention his name, and I think we forgot. And that was another, this was a Dan. Louisa?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Who was that professor? His name was Dan.
Dan Quilter?
Yes.
Yeah,
Dan
absolutely.
Quilter.
Yeah.
And we wanted to mention Dan too. Dan
Absolutely.
Quilter and Russ Salmon were two of the great teachers of all time at Indiana University in Spanish. And they shared a tremendous amount with IFLTA over the years.
They did.
We were very fortunate with that.
And these were professors that truly were teacher fans. And I think when you put great professors together, we all have our strengths. But when you find the ones that care very much about teacher formation, then you've got amazing support, and they're with you forever. And again, Martha, I know you're watching. I'm including you in this bunch too, because
Martha,
if you don't have them, you can't go anywhere.
We can't forget Martha. Martha, how are you, Martha? And Martha did a lot of things over the
Yes,
we did a lot of crazy things. Israel, we're fortunate to have Israel now doing so much too from Indiana University. He's magnificent. Okay, so we're going to the next slide.
Yes.
Okay.
Jomé, thank you. Now, after 4 years, I had an opportunity to join the most amazing township that I've been a part of is Washington Township. And I started working at West Lane in 1994. And I never thought that I would spend the next 22 years teaching middle school Spanish. But once again, too, because of the strength and bonds I've met through the professional communities, I want to bring in now, we have IFLTA and AATSP, along with Central States, because we were hosting Central States several times in the 90s and early 2000s, and ACFL. Tom decides that it's also important for me to be the local arrangements chair in 1994 for the IFLTA conference, the first semester I'm at West Lane. But again, it was necessary because it pushed me into an area of excellence I never thought was possible, and that I could do it after only 4 years of teaching. So this is an important time. And also, Tom, we didn't say much about the Joe Mason Day, but let's talk about it now, because at West Lane, this became one of my identifying marks, the contest.
So Louisa had a lot of success with Joe Mason Day, and she won I don't know how many years in a row. And I have to tell you a funny story. One day I had to take, for some reason, she didn't pick up her trophies for her students and the Premio Gordo, and she didn't pick those up. So I ended up taking them over to her school. One day after school, I left Ben Davis High School and I went over to West Lane. And so I walked in and the principal was there, and he said, what are you here for? And I said, oh, I have trophies. And I had so many trophies that I had to do 2 trips to the car. I had these big boxes of trophies. And I said, you have a really good teacher here. Look at all these trophies you won. And, but I got had so many trophies, it took me probably 20 minutes to unload the trophies. So that's the kind of job that Louisa did. And one of the things that was interesting about Louisa, the big thing about her, she was a great motivator. And I always admired her for how she had motivated her students. And she would get them to participate in a Joe Mason Day and whatever the activity happened to be. And she loved to do the skits, as I did. And she'd always have her students in the skit competition, the nonstop conversation, and all those neat things. So did a great job.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. John May? All right. Well, after about 5 years, we had some changes in our school at West Lane. And this is going to be a unique kind of community because we're talking about building the professional learning community. The concept of the PLCs became a very hot topic in the early 2000s in all of our schools. And it was for a good reason, because one of the things that's super important in a strong program is the team building. And so my principal, we just had a change in principals. Linda Lawrence came on board, and she noticed a good camaraderie that I was having with my colleague, Jenny Callan, who just became the French teacher starting in 2000 and was also teaching Spanish because we had such a large enrollment and her licensure allowed her to teach both. And so after we were in the second year working together, our principal asked us, would you guys like to do something unique in building a better PLC by traveling, since this is what you guys know best? So we said, heck yes. So we took the opportunity to do some really, really good communication practicing by going into other cultures. So I went into Romania, because that's where she's originally from, and spent the first part of our trip there. And the second part, we went to Spain. We were trying to add France too, but we didn't quite make it to the French border, but we spent some time between Barcelona and Madrid. And what's in the slide, in addition to some of the pictures, I have is a letter of recommendation from Jenny that she wrote to the Department of Education when I was up for the State Teacher of the Year award. And I was just so heartfelt for the things she said about me. But one of the things that was really, really important is that if you're going to build solid curriculum, you got to know your colleagues, you got to trust them, and you've got to be able to share the very best so that we're all our best. And this was super important, as later we would add more to teaching staff to Spanish and eventually Mandarin as well. Actually, the Mandarin came on pretty quickly in the early 2000s, and then we expanded the Spanish. So these three languages were also taught at the high school. So we were preparing very well to bring Washington Township at the middle school level in our building and the other two to get into this whole realm of the International Baccalaureate. So for me, this community was essential, because if you can't communicate well with your colleagues, it's going to show in your classrooms, and then oftentimes our kids would cross. And so it was really important that we had certain strategies and classroom management styles that were similar, so that if kids change languages, they would know what was still expected of them, no matter what language they were teaching. So that was and I will say more about my PLC towards the end of my time at West Lane, but it was incredible to be a group of 5 and be able to agree on most things and how we're going to present this to our students. But it started with my great friendship and my best friend, Jenny, at the time, and she's still my best friend. Tom?
Well, I met Jenny at IFLTA a couple of years ago, and she's a wonderful person. And you always have spoken highly of her. I did get to meet her. And I also read that letter, and that letter was impressive and beautifully done. And it spoke volumes about Jenny as well as you. So magnificent person, and we were fortunate to have met her. Yes.
And I should say too, I learned Romanian. In fact, I hear probably as much Romanian on a daily basis when I'm visiting with her and her husband and her family as I would speaking Spanish, when Tony and I joke around the language. But you know, when you have another language, it's always a part of you, no matter where you're going. That's pretty awesome too. And this is one of the things I think I know impressed Jenny too, is my willingness. I've been to Romania 4 times over the last 18 years, and I saw so many similarities in the country to the changes of Spain after in 1975. And I just really love being able to look at these 2 countries and see what's commonly bonded in the language itself. Trying to study Romanian is not easy, but it was doable because of my language experiences, knowing Spanish and French, and the Catalan as well. Jamme, next slide. Now we continue on. As Tom already knows, the experience of being a coach for the concurso académico, also known as the Joe Mason Day, was pretty intense. And when you first just getting kids interested, but then also trying to establish their skill sets. And for me, this again, the communities and the curriculum are important because you're not just teaching them how to do something for one day. You're helping them see why it's important to have nonstop conversation. We're talking Spanish as much as we can. Can you do that from a variety of visual prompts and cues? If you love poetry, well, I'm going to give you the coolest books that you can find and that are appropriate for your age group. And if you can memorize this, and there's always a great skill there. And there are other kids who love the drama and putting those skits together. Those kids wrote those scripts, you know, and that was amazing watching the ability and the language level that took those kids to places that I know they wouldn't have done just using a simple textbook. And so for me, what was successful was being able to incorporate the team. Most of them were 8th graders, but we would bring 7th graders if they had some ability to keep up with the others. But this was, to me, was one of those important ways to keep the group together in 8th grade. And even if you were not on the team, you could still support the team members. And we did a lot of practices. These students were well prepared because we created small groups in the classroom to prepare and to practice the language. Tom, you were a model for me. You know this in this area.
We did a lot of those together, didn't we?
Yes.
I believe this started somewhere around 1984. It's still running. It's been one of the longest running academic competitions in the United States in Spanish, with the exception, I believe, of the one in Florida. And one of the people who helped start this, by the way, was the great Edris Tafiere, who was one of the great Spanish teachers as well as Louisa in the state of Indiana, in the country. And I wanted to ask Louisa a quick question here. How many of these students did you take to the event? You took a lot of kids.
Oh my God. Generally speaking, it'd be probably about up to 30. I mean, because you're considering I had 2 sections of each grade level. So I was teaching 6 classes every time. So 2 8th grade classes. So that could be close to 60 kids. Never had that many in the actual team. But when I taught at Monrovia, I had maybe 6 kids on the team. But by the time we got this really going and trying to get every event covered for all the students, it was easy, a team of 30 plus. Yeah. John May, next slide. Now, one of the things that's super important for me, another kind of community in the classroom, is the students who show up every day in your room. Those kids come from all variety of backgrounds, skill sets, want to be there, don't want to be there. And whether you're in the junior high, middle school idea level, or you're at the high school, this has been probably my most famous thing that I do the most in presenting at IFLTA is how to incorporate classroom management so it improves student engagement. And these the pictures in the middle are definitely of my most recent classrooms. This is North Central, and the orange graphic of the classroom jobs has just been the modification over the last, at least 20 years of how to incorporate job descriptions as job titles for kids to do on a regular basis. Because if you assign a task, and I would group them in groups of 4, and what you see in this picture, Tom will recognize the metro sign. When I was doing this at West Lane, it was to help the kids learn the names of the countries and capitals. And so they would be divided in sections and have their jobs. Some of these jobs, for those of you who might not be able to see the icon very well, we had administrative assistants, cheerleaders or reviewers, warm-up people, point takers, a secretary for the absent person in attendance, and distributors and collectors of the materials, textbooks, etc. A door monitor was added on. Most recently, things that were added on was a timekeeper to maintain that comprehensible input on task language use. And so that was a favorite because you got to use your cell phone to monitor the time. And also we had so much skits and practice and getting up in front of the class demonstrating. We needed a stage manager. And so I would always find these jobs working based on where the kids were located in the room and what their skill sets and what they were comfortable doing. So everybody had a chance to do something to be a part of that classroom. And even if it wasn't their turn today, they knew they would be doing it at some point in the week. And this just kept everybody on their toes, including me. So, Tom.
Well, nothing to ask about other than to congratulate you on this wonderful idea that I saw in action the day I visited your classes, and how all the people had tasks to do. And I don't know how many classes you had, 6 a day, and I don't know how many people were in the classes. There were a lot of people in those classes. But to have people have the responsibilities and to make the students feel part of the educational process doing this was phenomenal, and congratulations. Wonderful.
All right, Jamie, we have some slides. Yes.
Before that slide, we have a question from Marta. So,
Yeah.
Chame, could you read the?
Give me a second.
So, from
I got a question from Deborah Blaze. She's typed Lily Grant. It's about the travel.
it's about the years of experience. What is the best recommendation for how much a teacher could insist on students speaking the target language?
Okay, I think I'm catching part of that. I mean, unfortunately, the closed caption is cut off on the bottom of my screen. So it's, if I understood you correctly, the amount from my own experience.
From your experience.
And what do we want the students about students learning a second language abroad? I'm sorry, I just didn't get the whole question.
How much a teacher should insist on students speaking the target?
Oh, got you. Well, first of all, it depends on the level and also on the reason the student's taking the course. And, you know, I'm going to say this bluntly now as a high school teacher, my second year program is one of great challenge because I'm teaching those kids how to be good communicators in English, never mind in Spanish. So for me, whether you're a fourth grader, a sixth grader, a 10th grader, I have plenty of students who are just going to listen for quite a while. And I understand that. But also when I look at the maturity and where they stand and what they're taking the language for, if they're not going to be speakers, they better be listeners. Because in my classroom setup, the idea is to try your very best to allow me to teach and be with them completely in the language. Now, that doesn't happen every single day with certain classes, but I'm just going to say, if you're not going to be a speaker yet, and maybe you won't be a proficient speaker, you will learn to listen and you'll learn to understand how the language is operating and showing a culture and showing the diversity of what can be experienced with language. I know lots of theory, and I've watched it happen. There's some kids from the first day want to be talking, but I'm going to be talking in Spanish. And so of course they're going to be listeners, but the sooner they can start engaging is when they really start getting the most out of it. When we were downtime, this is a long answer for this question, but I'm going to say when I was doing my last quarter of teaching, the last 10 weeks, the students weren't talking to me at all, except through their writing, but they were writing to me in Spanish. They had already had 3 quarters with me of this past school year, and many of them already knew what we were about. And yes, we missed the classroom, we missed being with each other, but what was pretty incredible is I tried to give as much comprehensible input in every task I did on my Canvas units. Those students heard so much authentic language being presented for the topics that we had to finish. And I had a great time doing that because I wanted the students to know, you may not be speaking a lot to me right now, but you can be improving your interpretive skills tremendously. And so I had great pleasure just going and looking for those websites that would connect well with the other units of study we were doing. And with that, I feel like the students probably gained even more in this last 10 weeks because they didn't have the pressure to perform, but they did have the pressure to mimic the culture with the tasks I gave them, or they had the opportunity to read. And a lot of my students were very happy that I had audio connected with the readers that we were doing. So some students were extremely happy that they could listen to the text they were reading as much as reading out loud. They did miss the dramatization of the readers, and I had that too, being a challenge those last 10 weeks. So, yes, Jomei?
Lisa, there's 3 teachers. They're wondering about the class jobs. Could you explain more details about the class jobs assignments?
Sure.
And how did that work?
Well, at the very, you train them. The first semester, the first month of school, the kids learn how they're going to be playing the game in my classroom. And so basically, it didn't matter what level, whether it was an honors class or a regular class, whether it was junior high or high school, they would find out that there were expected jobs. And so I would give them the presentations of those jobs, and the kids would do a gallery walk and they would look at the descriptions. I had a variety of different ways to engage that group of kids to learn more about the jobs. I also had them practice the jobs so they could find out which one would be the ones they would prefer to be signed up for. And so every year, I just got better at it, but I assigned jobs in the last few years based on the personality. So I got to get to know the kids. So by the time I would say September rolled around, we'd been in school about 4 weeks at that point. The students all knew the jobs existed. They knew that they had to participate. And they also got points for doing their jobs, which many of them were not production in language, but they helped the classroom flow well. And so those jobs then earned points, and they had a whole a series of logs. And by the way, this is something that I developed with West Lane colleagues. So the 5 of us used a type of participation log, which they had accountability. They could see every day what they needed to do to be able to get so many participation points to get that solid A. And the students saw this was one of the easier sections of their grade, was to participate. And that was the whole point of it. So description, practice, practice, practice. And the results were beneficial and were obvious. The kids got into it. So.
Okay.
I know we're running out of time, Israel and John May, and I'm also, we're right here at the point where the Teacher of the Year becomes the most important professional leadership that I was a part of. And as you can see in the cluster of pictures here, the National State Teachers of the Year program was sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education, and up until recently, the CCSSO. And this was not just an award you get for one day and then you go back in the classroom. We were committed for the year, and actually could have been 2 years depending on how you acted out in your state. In this way, for us, we were under professional development for 4 times in the year. And some of the coming slides show those professional developments, but it was about bringing a cohort of the 50 states plus the 5 departments of defense schools around the world. And those 55 teachers then did things together, and we discussed the most important issues of the day. And that particular year. I was also honored to be able to work in the Department of Education on a sabbatical. Not everybody got that lucky, but I was fortunate that year. So Chami, if you can go to another slide, and Tom and I will try and see if we can close some of these up. This is one of the most important times and most fun. International Space Camp happens in Huntsville, Alabama, and every summer the Teachers of the Year come together to form an International Space Camp, because in addition to our 55 teachers, we also had other countries from around the world interested in space and science. And so we brought, that would bring us up to about 67 teachers, and we formed pods, and we learned how to run a mission. And our particular year in 2006, Northrop Grumman came on board as one of major sponsors to allow us to have 3 extra days of training to do a zero gravity flight. And Tom was asking me earlier, why would you want that? Why do teachers need to know about that? And these were important years, because you're talking about collaboration, what it means to run a mission. And so as she's showing some of the slides, let's go and jump on this one. Go back to the next one, the one with the orange t-shirt.
Can I make
Because Tom can talk to this. Right here, Chummy. Okay. Tom, I'm going to let you speak on this particular event.
Well, I wanted to go back to the Teacher of the Year award, because the audience may not know this, but Louisa became only the 3rd teacher, the 3rd teacher who taught either a modern language or classic language to be named Teacher of the Year in Indiana for all disciplines and all levels, which was an incredible thing. And she's the only one in modern languages, I believe, in past history that ever has won that award. So I wanted to certainly compliment her for that. And number 2 is, after she got the award, she got to meet those people on the right. Can you tell me about those people on the right real quick? And tell me why you really were impressed. Right?
Well,
tell me about why you were really impressed.
Yes, well, first of all, just being in the White House was a huge honor, as anybody would imagine. But they bring all the Teachers of the Year one day, the day that they're going to do the Rose Garden ceremony. And at the time, President George Bush was our president, and his wife were there to greet every single teacher individually and have about a 30-second dialogue. So we're all kept in the Roosevelt Room, which is right next to the Oval Office. And then there's a series of little channel hallways. I'm probably giving away secret security measures here, but as you are walking through the hallway, you have a person prepping you and getting you ready to say the right thing and to make sure you don't say the wrong thing. So I'm all set to greet the president and his wife, and they speak first, and they spoke to me in Spanish. And I was just so blown away by that. I was just like, and of course, because they have family members that are native speakers of Spanish, but it just tickled me because I really, that kept me so relaxed for the rest of the time. It was a blur. That 30 seconds were a blur. But to be able to start a conversation and have it be in Spanish, that means they were paying attention. They knew I was a Spanish teacher. And there were only 3 State Teachers of the Year in 2006 that were represented among the 55. And so I was the only Spanish teacher, and we had 2 French teachers there too. But just, it was an absolute honor to meet them. They were so kind to all of us, and it was just a beautiful day. So thank you, Tom, for making me remember that again. Chame, as you're going through some of these slides, the one I wanted you to go to is another community opportunity. So if we can jump about 2 or 3 slides going forward.
This one?
Well, that's good. And that was my sabbatical year, but I want to keep going forward just because I know the time is short. This was pretty incredible. This was the Indiana Principals Leadership Academy, which was housed in the Department of Education. And I got to know quite a few of the members who run this group. And this already in 2007 had at least 20 years of experience. This particular, it's an independent group, but they get support or had support from the DOE at the time to help train brand new principals how to be better principals when they were getting their first assignments. So there you go. That particular experience was a commitment for 3 more years while I was back in the classroom again at Wesleyan. And so I was on team number 45. Vince Barnes was our lead principal, and the incredible professional development that was going on there for the principals. I was the only teacher involved here. And so I was able to watch leadership at the highest level of a community building and see how the communication piece was put into play for these young principals. As we were talking about space missions, and patches are very clearly important in the sciences and NASA. This group also believed in the patch because it represented the focus of the mission. So my particular year, I convinced all the principals on my leadership group that we needed to embrace world languages. We need to embrace compassion for other cultures and diversity. So they allowed me to design this and put at least, there's probably about 7 or 8 different languages in there, the ones I've been learning and the ones that were part of the school district that I taught in. So this was just an important experience for me. And in 2010, I was recognized for an Outstanding Leadership Award as the teacher advocate for that particular cohort. And most of these cohorts didn't have teachers a part of them, but I got to know the people in charge, and they were lovely people. And so I was blessed to be able to be a part of this group. Okay, Tom, should we keep going forward? I wanted to keep going. Chame? There we go. This is a special slide for me because Tom has a connection to LaGrotto, and one of the things that I found perfect about this experience is that LaGrotto was a former student of Spanish at Ben Davis, and he can say a few words about that, but LaGrotto is a gringo like me. And he learned Spanish in a very unique way. And his whole message is one of positivity and about language learning. And so we invited LaGrotto 2 times to come and perform for our classmates and our students, whether they were in the beginning of a 6th grade experience, 7th or 8th grade. And so these were just some opportune moments that I couldn't pass up in putting him in. And he is one of the local community members because he's born and raised on the west side of Indianapolis. And so I just wanted to show that we had units of study that were important for our 7th graders in particular, and they had to study the local community. And this was one of the opportunities for them to get to check out LaGrotto. He's a big time rapper, but he does some pretty special things with education. And he also had some experience working in an E&L program in Lawrence Township as well. Tom, would you like to add?
Yes, LaGrotto is still continuing in education and doing his programs, his concerts throughout the United States. And I had him in class at Spanish and had a tremendous ability in Spanish. And then he went on to the Defense Institute in Monterrey and studied Spanish further. And he is a total gringo, and he's called the Güero Loco. by many of his Latino friends, and he has thousands of Latino friends around the country. But anyway, he goes to Louisa's school one day, and she asked if he could give a little concert there. And so I thought I'd go out and just see how things were going with Guerrero, because I was kind of helping him at the time. And Louisa was just incredible. There must have been 150 kids in this room. I don't know. And I couldn't believe it. Louisa had it organized so beautifully. And they came in, and it was like, and then they're all rapping. All the kids are rapping, and they're rapping the verbos and the alfabeto in Spanish. And it was just beautiful. And but if you saw how organized Louisa is and the effect she has on the kids, that's why she has a lot of these awards and the interest that she has for those kids. So, and love those kids. But it was beautiful. I was happy to be there and see it all and see Louisa in action. And Guerrero was incredible as well, but they both were.
And I can add that Güero Loco is in this presentation. So you can see he's one of the participants.
He's incredible.
So, hola, hombre. Güero, bueno, no vas a cantar ahora. Eh? He's not going to sing now. Okay.
Couldn't begin to compete with him. Jermaine, another slide. There we go. Continuing on, this whole idea of the local community also worked its way as we developed with my colleagues. We had this opportunity to describe La Hispanidad. And this was a term that I had all my 7th graders master by the time we finished their 7th grade experience. And I love the term because it just showed up in a textbook one time. And I thought, you know, I'm gonna check out this word Hispanidad. And basically, the concept is that when community comes together, whether you're a native speaker or not, if you can share that community experience in the target language being Spanish, you've just developed a whole new experience of culture. And I've always loved that idea because at this time when I was trying to get 7th graders excited, 7th grade's a tough year when you're in the middle of the middle school experience. And I wanted these guys to know that the language that they were learning really would play a place in their understanding of where is Spanish spoken. And every year it gets closer and closer to home. It's all about Indianapolis. We have La Hispanidad in many parts of our community. And so I made the students do the research. And so they were doing presentations. The left-hand picture is a total collage, and our principal, Linda Lawrence at the time in the middle there, who was being informed by 7th graders about their research and what they found. And they had to present a piece in Spanish, and they could do a visual in English or Spanish, and many of them did all of it as much as they could in Spanish. And so these were just some of the kids. I had my student teacher, Marcel Vasquez, over there on the right. We are with some of the kids who just, you know, we're all pumped about this. And this was always in connection to, we tried to put the music right around this time too. So Güero Loco was a part of this particular year, and the kids already had, they all wanted to do Güero Loco as their famous person. And so we have others besides Güero, but it was great to have them. Also, we had a food drive that I did for many years called Got La Plaza, and La Plaza became the newer version of the Hispano-American Center that was housed downtown. And so La Plaza, we often, in fact, the picture of us, we filled this whole school bus one day of food, and the ENL classes and Spanish classes got together, and they sent all that food to the La Plaza Center on the east side of Indy. And so from that experience, we decided to continue. And that was also supported by the PTO. And we just had a lot of support in the building to help make these programs come alive for the kids. John May? Moving on, right before my next to last year at West Lane, we had opportunities. Rachel Carlisle, who's pictured here next to me on the left here, was passionate about getting kids into travel. So with her leadership, we were able to do, she's done since and several more trips to Spain, and she included France as well. So Jenny, who's on the far right of that picture, joined us, and our counselor, Jen Patzel, there in the middle as well. We took our first group of kids to Spain over a spring break. So we were gone for 10 days. And that experience of bringing the classroom to the place of where the language is spoken was just fantastic. And I know that's not a new concept. Not everybody can do it. In fact, for many years, I was very concerned about how we could bring as many kids who can't financially support it and fund it. And so we found ways to get kids, any kid who wanted to take that trip, we found a way to get them to be on that experience with us. And I just was, so grateful to our principal and for the way Rachel handled that and still handles that in her own interest where she teaches now. This is going to be, something that the kids never forget. And many of these kids you see in these pictures, I actually had them in high school as well. So we were able to reflect back. I mean, some of these students I knew for almost 6 years by the time I switched over to North Central. But just wanted to mention that this can change the life for some kids in ways you'll never know. And they continue to talk about their trips. And Tom, I know you support this because you're an avid promoter of teachers and students studying abroad.
Yes, totally. I think that's a huge part of the learning process. The more time we can get the kids into the country where the language is spoken, the better they do, and to absorb the culture. I was going to ask you a quick question. What was the funniest thing that happened to you on one of these 2 trips? Was there a funny episode? Do you have any funny things?
There's always an interesting moment. You can see a cooking class, which was wonderful. I was actually so impressed with kids who weren't always the best behaved, became fantastic, well-behaved children when they got to do the cool things they wanted to do. But one of the things, and I don't have that picture, but with these boys, there's a lot of big interest in soccer. So we were in the Buen Retiro, the Parque Retiro, which is kind of like Central Park for Madrid, and we had some downtime. So we were trying to consider, what can we do with these kids? They need a break, and we wanted to hang out in the Retiro. So they decided to do a pickup soccer game. And I, the bold one I am, decided to go ahead and play soccer with them. And the grass was slippery wet, and the kids thought that was the coolest thing, to slide across the grass and make their kicks and moves. And we were just creating the game as we went along. We had pine trees as the markers for the goals. Well, I took a slide and went sliding down the grass and eventually landed on my back end. And I was kind of stuck there. And all the boys ran over and picked me up and said, Senora, are you okay? I said, yeah, I just can't believe I did that, but I'm okay. But they took pictures, and they were kind of funny, but not the most glamorous looking of me. But, just wanting to be with them and to play the games with them and to show them, even if I was, in my late 40s, early 50s, I could still do this. But I also learned you do what you can and don't always be the show off. But they were laughing forever. That was the conversation that evening. Senora playing and falling down. But yeah, all is good. Next slide, Chame. Well, in my last 4 years in Washington Township, I decided to go and do the high school thing again. And I never expected where I'd be in the 4 years that I was going to be, because I'm bringing back the professional communities again in this slide, because after being the teacher of the year and being asked to do so much, I will admit I took a hiatus from the language organizations for a while. It was so much. And after my district decided to become fully invested in the International Baccalaureate program for middle school and for elementary on top of our diploma program, the amount of training we went through for that was super time consuming. So when I decided it was time to process and bring the MYP to the last 2 years of its program, you have to do that at the high school. And so I went to the high school hoping to be able to do that. And there were some challenges there, but one of the things that I was able to bring to North Central was all my experience as a PLC team leader from West Lane, and just to be able to continue bringing the implementation of the curriculum that was necessary for language acquisition, which is what they refer to world languages in the IB terms. And I somehow got the attention of Israel. And the next thing I know, being up for a new award, and I don't know why, but that was okay, because I was just minding my own business, doing my thing in North Central. But again, right away, within 1 year, 2 years, Central States and ACTFL became very active participants in my career, because again, for me, if I'm not being challenged, I'm getting bored. And so I really, really needed these groups to keep me going. And you'll see in the next slide, Chame, some of the things that took place. The one on the left, I didn't even know AATSB had this award, and this is called the Student Voice Award for Outstanding Spanish Teaching. And I was just very, very touched by that. And in fact, Israel gave me the connection to meet Luis Navarro, who is one of our MCs for Telemundo Visión in Indianapolis, and the show that he does every week called In Contexto. So I had an opportunity to share my experience with that. And at that time, that led me also to being a candidate for the IFLTA Award in 2017. And so I was in progress, again, being nominated and chosen as a Teacher of the Year. I thought, you know, once you get it once, it's okay. You don't have to do it again. But I was very honored. And the biggest honor was then going from being the 2017 IFLTA Teacher of the Year for all languages and levels, then to be honored as a candidate for Central States. And that probably was one of the most challenging portfolios I ever had to write. It even topped what I did for the Teacher of the Year for the state. No offense, state level, but this was so different because I truly had to prove what I knew about theory in language acquisition and talk with the experience that I have gained from being a Teacher of the Year for the state of Indiana. And it just all came together very nicely. And well, just to be honored and to be one of 9 finalists, you know, I couldn't do any better. And so I'm really, really grateful to Central States. It definitely gave me an opportunity to go through a lot of new visiting of the professional organizations that have brought me to this place I am today. And while I made the decision to retire at the beginning of last school year, it's because I have other voices that I want to respond to inside myself, and I need to take the educator role and take it into a new level of vocation. And the new communities that I look at for my personal life, my parishes that I belong to on the South Side, and what things I can do for adults. And I love children, and I've been with them for 30 years, but now I feel a calling to promote and to mentor other adults, whether it's in teaching or in spiritual ways. That's where I'm hoping to go. And Tom,
Louisa,
go right ahead.
Tom, I need to mention here that just 2 people have been interviewing Telemundo. You are one of those, and the other one is Pam Gemmer, who was also interviewed in Telemundo because of her award in Central States.
Yeah. It was awesome. Thank you. Tom?
Okay. This is kind of a closing statement.
Yes.
And, so how fortunate for all of us in our profession, all of Louisa's colleagues, administrators, students, and parents to have had the opportunity to have Louisa as a teacher, mentor, and a friend. Louisa, special congratulations for your 30+ years of exemplary teaching and professional involvement in our profession. Thank you for all your contributions to the world language profession. Feliz jubilación, happy retirement. And everybody can give a round of applause, or we can act like we're giving a toast of brindis, okay? So it's to you, and we appreciate all of your wonderful things that you've given us all. And also special thanks to Israel at Indiana University and Jumei for helping arrange this tribute to Louisa. Thank you all very much. Beautiful. Thank you all for doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, and thank you, Louisa, for sharing all your expertise and you know, like a way to follow your steps. You know, like it's a great reference that teachers can have, because you have been a leader for the profession, and also the engagement that you have with the students. And thank you, Tom, as well, because you are also a reference in Indiana. When I came to Indiana, I was just hearing your name as a leader, and you know, you follow the leader, you learn from the leaders, and it has been great to have, you know, that reference in the profession.
The other thing, one last word for all the teachers out there, and that is, you can do the same thing. You can get your awards, and if you get involved in the professional organizations, you're going to end up just like Louisa and beyond. So don't give up, and get out there and get involved professionally. Attend all those conferences. ACFL is having a virtual conference coming up, and IFLTA is having a conference coming up. So don't forget to attend those conferences.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Israel and Chomei. And by the way, I have said this to plenty of teachers. If you want it, you can get it, but you do have to put the time in, and you have to really have the genuine care. And if you don't love kids, if you don't love teenagers, this job ain't for you. And I have to say that very honestly, because in the beginning, I thought I knew it all because I knew the language and the culture so well. But let me tell you, no, not until you understand why you're doing this for children, so they can become the people of the future that are going to help us, in our old age. I am so happy to know how many students I've taught. I think I've counted well over 5,000 students. And if they were listening, we're in really good hands. And this is times every teacher who has amazing experiences and gets this from the kids, because the students will teach us every day. And that's why we keep doing what we're doing. And so, for me, this is, I love my content area, but I love the students too. And they're not easy days. Definitely, they're not easy days, but they're important days, because when I learn so much about kids, when they share the most difficult times, then you truly have their confidence, and then they will learn from you. And that's what it's all about. Thank you.
So great. Yeah, that's true. I totally
So
agree.
proud of
So
you.
thank you once again, Lisa. Thank you, Tom.